Hello and welcome to the Paletteful Packs YouTube channel. My name is Alice and today I have the April 2023 Paletteful Premiere Pack here in front of me and I'm super excited for this one, so I'm going to go ahead, open it up, and we will see what's inside. Oh, blue! Okay, so as usual, the first thing that I see on the top is this super cute sticker. It has a little Paletteful box and then all of the little supplies and everything around it, and I just think it's so precious, so I love this. I can't wait to stick that in my sticker book. All right, let's get to the goodies. There is a canvas in here. Ooh, there's two canvases right on top. So this first one is a smaller panel canvas. It's going to be a 5x7 canvas. And then underneath here, we have a set of two canvases. These are the Daler Rowney stretched canvases. These are 100% cotton. They are triple primed, acid free, and it's 8x10. So these are gonna be perfect for painting on, because I'm assuming we're getting some paints in here. Alrighty, the next thing I see are the paints. Yay, so exciting. So these are oil paints. So we're going to get the Williamsburg oil paints. These are the colors that we got. We got Stille de Grand, I think that's how it's pronounced, Sèvres Blue, Fanchon Red, and Permanent Yellow Light. So these are Williamsburg oil colors, and these are made in small batches, and they're recognized for being really richly pigmented and dense. I'm super excited to try these. I really have been wanting to do more oil painting recently, so I cannot wait to try these out. These also are supposed to have a really dense, buttery consistency, so super excited to play around with these. Now we also have these three paint brushes in here. We have one Simply Simmons bristle brush. That's going to be this one in a size 6. Then we have two Sorrento oil brushes. So these are going to be in a size 8 and a size 4. And then finally we have the Daniel Smith refined linseed oil to use with our oil paints. All right, so this is everything we're going to get in this month's Paletteful Premiere Pack. We're going to get the linseed oil, the 2 canvas pack, the canvas panel, the 3 brushes, and the 4 different colors of Williamsburg oil paint. So I'm really excited to play around with these. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Normally I would start out by making swatches of the paints, but for this I decided to split things up into 2 different sections. So for this first section, I'm going to work on a painting using only the oil colors that we got in this set. So the brown, the red, the yellow, and the blue. So for that, we're going to be drawing a Monstera leaf. I sketched out the Monstera leaf. I should have done this a little bit differently. I paint the whole thing red after this, and I would have recommended painting it red and then doing the sketch. I just kind of didn't really think it through. But once I did that, I painted everything red so it would have this warm tone that came through. This was a little bit of a risk because I hadn't actually tried this technique before. I'd just seen it on the internet, so I was a little nervous, but I think it worked out pretty well, so I would recommend it. Things were getting a little messy, so I stuck my board down using a little bit of masking tape, finished filling in the red, and then I mixed up a green using the yellow, the blue, and a little bit of the brown. And I started going in with the darks first, and then I moved into adding the lights. And you just kind of want to, when you're layering oil paint, it can be really difficult because you're kind of layering wet on top of wet. So the best way that I've found to do it is to really make sure that the layers that you're adding on top, each layer is thicker than the layer below. So start with thinner layers and build up to thicker layers. It also works best if you work from dark to light. It's basically starting with your darks. It's a lot harder to add the dark over the light. I tried it both ways. In this painting, I worked more from dark to light, and in the second painting, I had more of a light base, and the second painting was significantly harder to get contrast and to get the light, the darks into it. So I would definitely recommend working from dark to light. That's what's generally recommended with oils. I honestly couldn't remember when I was painting, and that's why the second painting was painted from light to dark, but I figured that way you guys get to see kind of the difference between how I can add the highlights onto this a lot more easily than I'm able to add the darks onto the next painting that we work on, and you'll be able to see the advantage of working from dark to light. Another good reason to work from dark to light is because it's generally recommended to keep your darks thinner because they'll recede into the background more, and have the thicker portions of your painting be the highlights because then they'll pull forward a little bit more like they would in real life. So for the second painting, I'm going to start with a base of yellow. And I think if I had just used a base of yellow, it would have been totally fine. But for this piece, I decided to add in white and Payne's Gray from a previous oil paint set that we'd gotten through Paletteful packs so that I could get a little bit more contrast. Because I added this white pigment so early, it made it really hard for the darks to overpower it. I thought that it would kind of make it so that everything had this glowing look, but instead it just kind of made it hard for me to get those dark shadows in. So if you're going to do something like this, don't do this current step where I'm putting white in. I thought that this, like I said, I thought it made sense. I was like starting with the background, working towards the foreground, get the sun in. But I should have just started with yellow and then added in the lighter white areas after. But that's what I did. So that's what we're doing. And then I go in with some green and start establishing these light rays where the light is going to be spilling across a field, and also establishing a little like hill area. Just kind of figuring out where the foreground and the background are going to be and what this scene is going to look like. Keeping it really, really loose right now, just using a couple different colors because I'm just establishing this overall sketch and trying to get this light hitting things the way that I want it to. Adding in a couple little areas where like trees might be, and then some larger trees in the foreground that I know that I want. Just using some brown and that big oil painting brush. This brush works great because it is an angled brush, so you can lay it flat to get those really thick strokes, but then you can turn it on its side to get those really narrow strokes for the branches. So it works really well for creating trees and for carving those little lines into the paint, because you do kind of essentially have to carve out and lay over the paint below it when you're layering paint on top of paint. So with that established, those kind of ideas established, I added in kind of the overall basic shape of where some of the foliage was going to be. I mixed up a dark green for this. Again, it got lightened by the background a little bit, but I was like, that's okay because it'll kind of be like the light is shining through. Also added in a little bit of like bush type stuff in the background where the light is hitting to kind of give it something to come through to create those shadows, and then adding in some more of that white just to kind of bring in some highlights, and adding in some more of that blue as shadows. So again, I'm just kind of trying to establish the overall sense of the piece, where things are going to go and things like that, but I can't get too dark because it's still quite wet. I waited a couple days for it to dry, and at this point it was still wet, but just ever so slightly tacky. So I could actually paint on top of it with some darker colors a little bit more. It did still blend out in some of the thicker areas of paint, for example, like right over the white spot. But for the thinner areas like the tree trunks, I was able to really layer up some red and some brown on there. This red is really going to warm up those tree trunks and imitate the light hitting on them, and just kind of bring our eye to them and bring them to a center of attention. And then we're going to use some cool colors to bring that back down a little bit and push and pull the eye and get some of those shadows in there. So I'm using a dark blue for the shadows, and that kind of contrasts with the red and creates this visual brown color while also establishing where the highlights and the shadows are. For some of the foliage, I'm using this kind of the big brush and the small brush, and I'm tapping on and also using regular brush strokes, but like tapping straight onto it to kind of create this little like bush foliage effect in the background. And I don't really know how to paint hills, so I just decided it was covered in trees and foliage and just made it kind of look like that. I used the smaller brush to go through and reestablish some of these stripy areas. This is where the paint was still a little bit wet, so things kind of wanted to blend into one another again. But I just went in and reestablished the highlights a little bit because they were getting a little bit lost. Just kind of something to consider is to make sure that you don't accidentally overblend and lose your highlights or lose your darks. That's really easy to do in oil paint, is to overblend, so just keep that in mind. To reestablish the shadows, I went in with almost the pure blue because it's going to be this lighter blue shadow, because it's not going to be so dark because it's further away. It's kind of got more of this atmospheric haze through it. So I decided to go with that lighter blue because it will still convey that area of shadow, but it's not going to overwhelm the piece like using a really dark blue would. I'm also using that lighter color to create a little bit of separation between the bushes and kind of trees that are in the horizon line. And then I'm going in and making a semi-poor choice. I wanted to try to add some red, but my paintbrush was a little bit dirty, and so the red kind of came out to be this weird orange color. I wanted to kind of add some like different tones to the sky, and I think I ended up pulling it off okay through blending and drawing in some little like clouds, which helped break up that sun and give it kind of a sunset look. But I think that's something, again, that I should have done at the start. I think maybe if I established it with an orange, that would have been a better way to go. So for anyone trying to recreate an image like this, maybe try starting with an orange instead of a yellow. Learn from my mistakes. Continuing to build up those tree trunks, I want to create some texture and some almost moss on them. So I throw on a little bit of green on there as well. With tree trunks, because they're brown, I do tend to throw on green, blue, and red, as well as some pure purples in my tree trunks, because you really can throw on a lot of those different colors, because when you look at them visually, they'll kind of blend out to be a brown. To really make my foliage pop, I'm using a stippling motion with this large brush and pressing down to create this kind of foliage effect, and just adding in some shadows there, but I do need it to dry before I can add in more shadows, so just adding in kind of that mid-tone layer. And then I'm going in and using the smaller brush to add in a little bit of grass detailing in the front where you would see it a little bit more. Again, I wait for things to dry a little bit. It is still wet. It's a little bit more tacky though, so I'm able to blend things out without them blending too much. So I was able to go in and do a little bit of blending towards the center area, and then also add in a couple more tones to the actual trees, just so that we can really establish that depth in that foliage and get all of that different, those different tones that you would get. I'm also reestablishing where some branches are, and I'm using some lighter colors to carve out the space in between the branches and in between the foliage where the sun might peek through, just so that you still retain those little areas, because those little areas can get lost, especially when you're adding in the foliage. So I'm just taking some time to add in these areas where light might peek through the leaves or the branches. But even after all this, I still needed some more contrast, so I waited for it to dry for like another 3 or 4 days. This piece did not take that much time in terms of actual painting time, but there was quite a bit of time waiting for things to dry so that I could put the next layer on. And for this next layer, I went ahead and mixed in some Payne's Gray. The Payne's Gray we got in a previous Paletteful Packs box, and I mixed that in just to get an even darker tone so that I could really add those final dark shadows to the tops of the bottom parts of the foliage and also to the tree, so it kind of looked like it was being lit from behind. Also reestablishing where some of those branches are so that they really look like they're being lit, and adding in some final shadows to the hill and to the foliage in the back. So adding this in just kind of makes everything pop a little bit more, and I finally am able to get that contrast that I was looking for. Again, I've mentioned it before, but I think if I hadn't added white at the start, it would have been a lot easier for me to get contrast. So bear that in mind. But you know, with patience and time and waiting for things to dry, like, this method does work. So just beware, there's a lot more patience involved, which is not really my strong suit, but oils are a great place to practice that. So I'm going in and adding a little bit more detailing on the grass area, and I'm also going to go in and add in a few colored dots to represent flowers, just to add in a little bit of whimsy to the piece. And after that, it's pretty much just tiny little details, finishing off little bits here and there. But this is pretty much done, my little sunlit scene, so I hope that you all like it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to get your own Paletteful Packs box, then you can click the link in the description box to see how to join us. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.